All right, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 284, and I am your host tonight, DBQ Hams. Whew, I am glad to be back, gentlemen. It has been too long. It has been 2 weeks at least that I've been out. Well, technically, I popped in briefly 2 weeks ago, but was dealing with a new PC and a number of driver issue updates and other things. So I was not able to join you. I did get a chance to listen to it, so thank you both. Last week I was out on vacation, and you guys soldiered on and continued the dialogue, so that is always much appreciated. And well-informed, thoughtful, insightful here on the Enough to Keep Going podcast. All that said, I'm not alone tonight because while I may be back, the two of you have been here holding down the fort for the last few weeks, as I have not been. So, Master99, thank you for having me back. Welcome me back with open windows.
Oh, open windows. Okay. Good. I'm glad you're back. Yes, you're having some technical difficulties, but it looks like it's all good to go now.
So far, we'll just keep talking, and if you drop out, then guess what? This is a very special podcast for everybody.
That's right.
This is the one where I lost it on the air. So, and running the boards over here is Game Logic. Game, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good. Twitter has thrown some weird curveballs. Apparently, when I copy and paste text from YouTube in, it doesn't just come across as plain text. It actually looks like it's pasting in as HTML. So I was trying to make the live stream announce on Twitter, and all of a sudden, like big blocky letters started showing up. And I'm like, what the? So, yeah, I'm a bit flummoxed. We had some rocky technical waters getting into the show and getting it up. So,
yes, we did.
Just wouldn't be the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast without it.
Without only a few technical glitches. So yes, thank you for pulling us all through that. So. But Game, I'm going to keep you on the mic here because you've got a new game, well, newish, new for us. It's a game that came out last month. Tao and I talked briefly about it in concept when it was, and it is on Game Pass. But you, sir, picked it up on PlayStation 5. So you have been playing Wo Long, Fallen Dynasty. One, why did you pick it up on PlayStation 5 versus PC or Xbox? What's the platform choice there, and how are you enjoying it?
Yeah, well, there's no specific reason. With all the platforms, I just try and kind of peanut butter the love around, so I get enough use out of each platform. So there was nothing sinister behind that. How I'm enjoying it is going to depend on the next couple of weeks. I will say. I booted in the game tonight before the podcast, and despite kind of double checking the functionality of the save features before I shut it down last time, I was very surprised to port into the game and find myself at the beginning of the first level, and so I was very angry.
How far did you progress?
I got into like the third battle flag, which apparently I learned tonight. I thought I'd fought like the first boss, but it was just a mini boss. That's actually the stopping waypoint before you really fight the first boss. And so I had like planted that battle flag and interacted with the battle flag, and then closed out of the game. I'd gone back to the main menu screen and then loaded the game save from the main menu screen and went back to like that final battle flag. And so I thought I was good to go. But tonight, when the game started, I showed up at the beginning of the level. More importantly, when I was like, well, maybe it just restarts from a checkpoint or an autosave point that doesn't really start from like doesn't like load your last save file. So I hit return to the main menu screen and went to load my last save file. But when I had returned to the main menu screen, that was the file that it saved. I went to the main menu screen and it auto-saved, again, from the beginning of the level. So I was very angry. So I did a little Googling around. It looks like the way it works is that you have to interact with the battle flag, which I had done. You know, every time I go to the battle flag, I would, you know, dive into the level up menu and the learn wizardry spells menu, even if I didn't have points to spend, right, on that, specifically because I thought that was the interaction that it required you to save the game. But maybe it requires more than that. Maybe it requires you interacting with the battle flag twice. I don't know. What I did tonight to try and ensure that I was saving was I customized the battle flag at each drop. And what I noticed that does is it saves the date and time that you customize the battle flag. So I'm like, well, maybe that's how you ensure that you're saving at the right checkpoint. So I'm not sure. I will say at least...
Is that similar to what it did in Neo, right? Because this is the developers Neo 2, right? It's similar to that. Is that mechanic similar to others, or is this a new mechanic in terms of the battle flag and the way that save is working to roll on?
It could be. I wouldn't know because I've never played any of the Neo games. And so that might be where I'm like deficient. But I would also say where the game design is deficient, if there's an expectation that you're coming into it, right, with that background, then it's not super, friendly to new players, right? And, you know, I will say that I played a little bit of Elden Ring. You know, I didn't stay on Elden Ring for a long time, but I definitely was able to figure out the save system and didn't have the same problem, right? So, you know, we were talking about games kind of in the Souls genre, the Souls vein, Souls subgenre. It's apparent, and I played a little bit of Bloodborne, right? But it's apparent that other game save mechanics, right, in you know, similar trajectories of this type of content have a thing that I was easily able to figure out. So, you know, after the podcast, I'll go back to Wolong and see if that customization of the battle flag is kind of what affected a game save. Otherwise, I will be, again, very angry. That all being said, you know, the slog back through, you know, like I said, I had all my level ups. I had all my new equipment. I had all the spells that I had learned. So the only thing I'd lost was like this fortitude factor, which is something you gain per level as you engage with enemies, or it's either fortitude or morale or a mix of both. And so the slog back through enemies that I'd previously fought is not nearly as bad as it was in Elden Ring or a Souls game. You know, and quite frankly, like the foot soldiers, while they present a threat, they're not as time consuming to take back down again, right? But the thing I never liked about Bloodborne or Elden Ring is trudging back through even an encounter area of like 10 foot soldiers was just exhausting, right? If you had to do it over again. It wasn't quick. It wasn't over, you couldn't just hit them, kill them, and move on, right? It was always like in Bloodborne, like that first gate, like into the city it was like a 10-minute fight, right? That you had to slowly, incrementally, methodically, laboriously take down each enemy, maneuver around the level to ensure that you weren't overwhelmed by multiple members of the mob. And like, so at least at this point, you know, in this first level of Wolong, it's not like that. And so kind of running back through the enemies kind of gave me an easy way to kind of, you know, quickly. And I mean, I'd only laid off a day since I'd played like that first level. It kind of, you know, quickly reacclimated me and allowed me to, you know, remember my timing for the parries and things like that. So at this point, it's not an entire turnoff, right? But I've got to figure out that save system, or else, you know, we're done here. So
yeah, that's not very intuitive at all, right? Like, no matter what you have played or haven't played, if it's not communicating where those kind of markers and checkpoints and what's being saved versus, you know, obviously some things are being saved, whether or not it's the geographic location of where you're at. But yeah, the communication in that's going to be key.
Yeah, but what I will say is from what I've played, you know, the comment I made about how this compares to Elden Ring, the difference to me is, and maybe if I'd stuck with Elden Ring more, I would have found some of this enjoyment. You know, when you're playing the game and you do nail parries and pull, like it's a really beautiful, right, animation and fluid movement. And it's, you know, the thing I mentioned was, you know, you're kind of treated to what you feel like is a little bit of like Saturday afternoon kung fu theater, right? If you're pulling things off well. And it's an invigorating thing to hit a parry and then immediately like turn on the enemy, and take them down. So, hopefully that keeps up. I will say the second fall off point might be the bosses. So I did move on past that area and encountered the first boss, and it took me a while to figure out how to beat him, but I eventually beat him. But it does one of the classic things that I really hate in video games is it does the morph into a second phase.
It's another wave. Yeah.
Right. So you defeat the first guy. He drinks a bunch of elixir and turns into this kind of. There's a lot of flavors of Onimusha. It feels like in this, but he turns into a second phase. That's like a monster that, like I said, is reminiscent of kind of an Onimusha Resident Evil kind of form. And then that is when it invokes this additional game mechanic that's the Jade, right? Which the Jade allows you to call forth like your spirit animal or your spirit monster or something like that. But they don't really explain that to you before you go into the battle. So I defeated that first form, was fighting the second form. I realized, after I'd gone and Googled it, that I'd seen that Jade thing pop, like go into the animation or the brightly lit indicator at the bottom of the screen, but I didn't know what the heck it meant, and I didn't know how to trigger it. So I fought the first boss through the first form, successfully defeated it, fought it the second time around to the point where I could have activated the Jade, where supposedly once it's activated, that actually ends the fight. So it gives you this impression that you have to completely defeat the monster, but you really only have to get it down to about 50% until that thing until your Jade thing fuels up and then pops. So hopefully I can theoretically replicate that. Otherwise, if I'm doing that same thing repetitiously over the next 2 weeks and never get past it, then and it's the next 2 weeks with me not playing every single night, right? I mean, I've got other games in the rotation, so that's going to be the attempt that I'm going to make. I'm like I said, I'm super impressed with the game. There are some points where the frame rate kind of stutters. I'm playing in resolution mode, at 4K. There are some points where it kind of stutters on the screen. In the first map, there's a bunch of flames and stuff around, which is a kind of irritating thing. You're fighting, all these people, and there are flames where if you step at them, you take damage from that, right? Which isn't super helpful. One of the things that I do notice is I've had to learn to, if I'm going to parry and expect to stay in the same place and not like actually pull a dodge and be like on the other side of the screen, right? Then I have to be really careful to take my hand off the analog sticks and only hit the circle button. And then when you parry, it's not always predictive, to me, at least at this point, where the enemy is going to wind up when you parry. So you have to take your hands off the sticks, hit the circle button, parry, react to where the enemy has now been dispositioned by your parry, and then attack in that direction, right? Or else you're swinging your sword or your pole arm off, in 270 degrees of the wrong direction. But other than those things, I've had a pretty enjoyable time. We'll just see if it kind of clicks in and I'm able to stick with it.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see as you cycle back around to it, because it is kind of a technical game. If that mechanisms and just the kind of mental, kind of that second nature aspect that some of that may require in terms of the precision gameplay you're talking about, how much of that it kind of atrophies over the past couple days when you're not playing it. So, but I'm glad that it sounds like it's got some good mechanics to it. You're enjoying the moments. It's as long as those moments kind of string together in something that's meaningful. All right. Tao, you and I have been playing something new this week as well. Well, maybe something that released this week. I think new maybe I'd be curious to see where we land on what counts as new. So MLB The Show, right? This past Wednesday was opening day for Major League Baseball, and MLB The Show came out on Wednesday or Thursday. Now, it looks like you're playing it both on Game Pass, which it's free, or at least it's included. But then you also picked it up on Switch.
Yes, I did pick it up on Switch. Yep.
And
Yeah, I had some money in there, so I figured I might as well. I'll just buy
Okay.
it. And I mentioned that I think in last show too that I was
And do
thinking
you
of buying it on the
have
Switch.
22 on Switch, or is this the first time that you're playing it on Switch?
No, yeah, this is the first time I'm playing on Switch.
Okay. So how I have 22 on Switch. So I've played it on Switch and I've played it on modern consoles. How are you noticing differences? You know, it took me a while. My swing timing was needed to be adjusted when I was moving between Xbox and Switch. Are you noticing any differences? Are you playing different modes? How are you tackling both of these?
So I'm pretty much doing the same thing I have been in the last couple of years, where I'm just doing the road to the show, and then just like the weekly and monthly challenges that they do. I haven't really played anything else right now, but I didn't really see any difference between the batting between the two, which is kind of odd because I thought it would. And I'm exclusively, well, so far I've exclusively only played on handheld, so that might help too. But yeah, like I haven't really seen any differences there. But as far as how the game runs, like when I'm actually playing the game, it's fine. I don't see any like stuttering or anything like that. But oddly enough, in between like the pitches and stuff, where you kind of get, they show like the animations of the guys, like hitting their bat, hitting their shoe with their bat, or just doing whatever. That where I see like kind of like it slows down a little, which I thought was kind of weird because that's basically just like it's just an animation. It's not like real time playing or anything like that. But that's the only thing so far that I've seen where it's had any trouble. I'm trying to think. I think doing like the practice stuff, that's been fine. Like when I'm going in road to the show, and when you have like a day off or two, you can go and do put up a skill. I haven't seen anything weird in there, so that seems fine. It's just like when you're playing the game and it's doing those weird like animations in between where it kind of like stutters and slows, which I thought was kind of odd. I don't know if you noticed that in the last game, or if it did that in the last game.
There were moments in where on the Switch where it did seem to kind of. I mean, it's running at like 30 frames per second. Um, yeah, I agree. Like playing the game on Switch feels perfectly fine. To me, I could tell the pace a little bit differently. But it was smooth. But yes,
Yeah.
I think the loading piece was definitely a factor there. So this is my first year since MLB 17 that I haven't started with a Road to the Show player. Is there any difference, or is it pretty much, if you did it last year and you did it this year, are you noticing any differences, or is it simply just a new character? Are the
No,
loadouts any different? All that kind of stuff?
no, I haven't seen any difference. There's like an animation here and there, like when you're interacting with the manager, or even at the very beginning when you get drafted. And I don't remember this, but there's like they show you like on a stage, like whoever drafts you, drafts you, and there's like smoke and stuff like that. I don't remember if they did that before. I mean, that's just like an extra aesthetic thing. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I haven't really seen any differences. Like
Yeah,
everything's
that's what
still the
it sounds like.
same.
Reading about it
Yeah,
online is that mode pretty much didn't get a whole lot of new content or work done on it. I've been playing a
yeah.
little bit of March to October, which is the kind of abbreviated season. The season aspect of that still plays pretty much the same. One of the things that they did, and I've noticed it already, is both the scouting and the drafting, that they've added pieces in there around that the scouting works a little bit differently. There's a little more nuance to it. You can, you know, narrow down some scouting pieces, look for certain positions, or discover prospects, and then drafting is a whole different piece that wasn't there before as well.
So a question I got for you then: when you played on the Switch last year, did they have cross progression on between the Switch
You
and
have
well
you
between
have
everything?
cross progression for your Road to the Show player and your Diamond Dynasty.
Right.
Were the two things that had cross progression. Yep.
Now, does it? So when it did that, like I just did it today, where I had been playing pretty much exclusively on the Switch, and then I booted up on Xbox. And I brought my character over fine, but did it save your season? Is it supposed to save your season that you had started playing?
I do not know because
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just
you never
looked
did
to
that.
see that it brought the character over, right? Like
Okay.
I didn't go in any further than that. So no, I
Okay.
don't know.
So I did have to start a new season. I mean, I had my character still with all this, the way he looked.
Which I think makes sense by the way that they save it, that it is the seasons are local to the council, but because Diamond Dynasty and the player character are tied together, that's saved server side then, which I think
Okay.
is the difference.
Okay.
So
I just
think
want to make sure.
yeah, no, I think the one piece that I was excited about and that I had a chance to dip into a little bit here is the storylines, the Negro League history aspects that they do here, which is really, really done well. They're introduced by the director of the Negro League Museum in Kansas City. They give some history around. I think right now there's 10 different players that are highlighted there, and you go through a couple of different, uh, different skill challenges. Certain, the first one is Satchel Paige, and you get some history on Satchel Paige, and then you need to do a challenge with pitching, and then you move on to scene 2 and get some more history and have a different challenge, and it kind of moves you through a couple of little vignettes around the player and their history, and gives you a chance to kind of interact, uh, you know, in a video game aspect, right? Like it does some animations that would be realistic to the player. The diamonds are a little more time period appropriate, but it still plays out. I haven't seen it enough to know, like, I don't think they're modifying rule changes or anything else like that to fit with 1952 or wherever in the time period that a player was in. So, but it's a great piece of history. I mean, I say this as somebody who last year planned a vacation to KC to do a number of things, and the Negro League Museum was one of the things on my list. So, yeah, that mode it's really kind of neat. It's really well done. Reminds me kind of the Jordan Challenge aspects from NBA 2K in terms of kind of giving you some history around there. And one of the things that's I'm finding interesting with it, well, I think the potential of it is interesting, is it says season 1. So are there more storylines to come? Are they, does it further explore the players of the Negro League? Does it go into other, baseball history, and it becomes a way to kind of interact with some of those pieces? So that to me is probably the newest aspect, because everything else pretty much feels the same as it has for the last year or two. It's not bad. It's a very solid playing baseball game, but the storylines piece really feels like the newest, the real addition in terms of content.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to jump into that yet. I didn't even realize it was going to be like a whole separate mode. So I was surprised when I saw that. So it's pretty cool. Now, when you're doing the challenge, is it the challenge is just like the normal like weekly and monthly challenges? Like it just gives you like, hey, strike out X amount of people or get a hit or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean it's but it's all limited with that person, right? Like you're trying to, strike out X number of batters, or close out the side without scoring a run, or cycle through your pitches and strike out 3 batters type of thing. I would think that's a pitching one, right? As you get into players who are not pitchers, you've got certain batting kind of caps to hit, things like that.
Cool.
All right. So let's move into the news, gentlemen. Unless Game Logic, do you have anything to add on MLB The Show? Okay. I know you've played it in the past. It's pretty much the same game. It's still really solid, but I don't know that even the player models looks pretty much like it did last year, which is the challenge with annualized sports franchises. But we've got a number of news stories here. Tao, we're going to move from sports franchises into a game that is a little bit of every game and allows itself to be built in all kinds of different ways. We've talked about Roblox a little bit. You actually have dipped your toe into Roblox the last couple of months here, but you've got, but Roblox has come under fire in terms of kind of its the way that it solicits credits, money, real money transactions from its players, which skew on the under 18 end of the spectrum. So what's your news story here?
Yeah, so this is coming from, I got this actually on GameIndustry.biz with Jeffrey Rousseau. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce his last name. Doing the article. They're talking about how there's an organization called Truth in Advertising, or TINA, as they shorten it there. About a year ago, had issued a complaint to the FTC on Roblox about their advertising policy. Excuse me, toward minors. So, and just kind of read a quote really real quick from Tina. Advertising is superstitious. I'm not even sure how to say that word. Pushed in front of millions of consumers, including more than 25 million children and adolescents, by a multitude of companies and their avatar influencers. Such digital deception is possible because Roblox has failed to establish any meaningful guardrails to ensure compliance with truth in advertising laws. And then this past October in 2022, they issued a follow-up to the FTC as once again calling out Roblox and not changing their standards. So Roblox has finally changed it, or is going to change it. It doesn't really say if they had already implemented this or not. Looks like they probably did. But basically, they had the following points. Were number one, ads that solicit charitable donations are not going to be allowed anymore. Ads that promote multi-level marketing companies or the products. Ads that promote financial services, such as tax preparation or credit monitoring, which is kind of weird to even do that. And then ads that promote cryptocurrencies and NFTs. Additionally, Roblox has provided guidelines to the developers on how to adhere to these new updated advertising standards. So I just wanted to kind of call this out just because I had been playing this recently with a child that is actually under 13 years old. So, but the one weird thing is I'm not, and they didn't really go into detail in the article, but how advertising is in actually the game, because I've never really seen. I've only played like a handful of games so far since I've kind of been back on it. And really only two. And I don't remember really seeing any advertising within the game, or even within like not necessarily in the games themselves, but even just like in the general launcher when you're in you can see all the different games. I don't really remember ever seeing any ads or anything like that. And maybe it's just specific games kind of do that maybe sometimes. So, and I didn't get a chance to kind of look up a little bit further in like how the advertising works. But I just find it weird myself that I never really saw any advertising even before this article came out within the past few months. So I'm assuming this was March 31st. And like I said, it doesn't really say if I'm assuming it's implemented now, but when it was actually implemented. So maybe that's why I hadn't seen anything in the last few months. Maybe it's already out there and had been implemented. So I just thought that was just the one weird thing I kind of pulled from it also. So any thoughts on this?
Well, one thing I'll mention is having been engaged with a difference of opinion on Twitter with some people about the Xbox versus the PlayStation UI. And I'd mentioned that my preference was for the Xbox One because the Xbox One is customizable. And what somebody brought up was all the ads. I was like, what are you talking about? What ads are there on the Xbox UI? And the problem is, because the Xbox UI is customizable, I customize it to have everything that I ever touch on that thing in the upper left-hand corner. And the next thing is Game Pass. And I almost never go below those left side icons and that one row down. And I used to pin like certain games to my home screen, but I stopped even bothering doing that because I'm like, I'm going to go into my game library and pick a thing, and then it's going to show up and be, in my recently played block. So I'm like, I don't need to do that. And what I realized is that over the multiple years that I've used that UI, because it's the same one since the Xbox One, right, that I have just become inoculated to the ads. Like I had completely didn't even realize that they were there. And when they brought this up, I went there and I looked at more than the like 4 icons that I use on the home screen. I'm like, oh, there are ads there. So it's possible, and I've done the same thing with like web browsers and things like that. People complain about the ads, and I'm like, Like I don't know that I ever see them, and I stopped using ad blockers because we found out some of the ad blockers themselves were ad aware and malware. And I was, I've just largely become. I get more bothered now on a web browser than the dumb GDPR thing that pops up and always asks you whether or not you want to accept cookies or not, than I am by ads. So I wonder if logging into it and just like taking a fresh look and like, looking around the entire UI, if you'll notice, a thing popping up there, even if it's, relatively innocent and unobtrusive.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I'm probably, I do have a lot of pins, and I actually have two different pin sections. One that's like mine, and then one's like family games for the Xbox side. And then I think, so it's like the main page, those two, and then I think Game Pass is under that. So yeah, I never go past that either. And then on the homepage, yeah, I've seen those advertised before, but I mean, they're on the smaller little icons that like, it's like whatever. Like I don't even notice them half the times, unless it's like something like animated or something. Like I won't even realize they're there. So,
yeah, I mean, interested to see when you go back to Roblox, if you notice that, right? If you're looking around, and if it's even just with a fresh set of eyes, like Game Logic's saying, if you see that someplace else in Roblox.
Yeah, and just out of these 4 points that they brought up, really the second one is probably the most important one. Like the other ones is like, I don't know if like 13-year-olds and under are going to care about tax preparation and charitable donations, maybe NFTs. That one I can see too, actually. I guess cryptocurrencies maybe, but the kind of the other two are just seem kind of weird. But I guess they got to try to cover their bases, I suppose. So.
Thank you, Tao. Game Logic, oh man. On the last week here, The Last of Us PC port has gotten lots of press coverage, but not because it's The Last of Us on PC, but because it's The Last of Us on PC and it's not working very well. It seems like we knew the specs were going to be, they were coming in pretty high prior to its launch, but it seems to have had a pretty rough technical launch. So you got some news story about it, right? You got a couple news stories, actually.
Yeah, let's start off talking about Steam Deck compatibility. Supposedly, the game is Steam Deck compatible. Neil Druckmann mentioned that it was PC Games End. So this article was posted on PC Games End by Phil Hayton. PC Games End indicates that in their testing, they were able to get it to run. Of course, it takes an exorbitantly long time to compile shaders, which is a problem on desktop as well. Performance wasn't that great. Attempting to boost FPS in the Steam Deck is a chore. They specifically mentioned they were getting about 20 to 30 frames per second on the handheld. AMD FSR2 should provide a helping hand in terms of Steam Deck performance, but with all the settings turned down low, they just weren't able to crank that much out of it. Now, different strokes for different folks. A lot of people just are happy that a game that they love is on Steam Deck, and are less concerned about its performability on Steam Deck. Some people try and crank, the absolute most that they can out of it, which I find kind of funny that people exert a lot of effort and make a really big deal out of getting, the difference between 45 frames per second and 60 frames per second. So, but whatever makes those people happy. But you can run it on Steam Deck is apparently the word. The mainstream story is about the port itself. And so, this has kind of has become a black eye, right, for Sony and for PlayStation. The story covered over on Push Square. The Last of Us PC is Naughty Dog's worst ever reviewed game by some margin. Article starts off saying, Naughty Dog deserves a standing ovation for somehow managing to cock up the PC port of one of the greatest games ever made. The developer, a symbol of consistency for many years, has just set one of the most disastrous releases in recent memory with The Last of Us Part 1, and all in the back of a ridiculously successful transmedia push as well. Now, this article's not particularly written very well, because obviously Naughty Dog are the ones accountable for the port, but they didn't actually hands-on do the port themselves. The port was done by, I think the studio's name is Iron Galaxies. And so they have an infamous reputation for doing a similar job on other efforts to port PC titles, including Batman Arkham Asylum. I think was the one that they ported to PC.
Did they do? I didn't think that was Iron Galaxy.
I think so. I'll fact check that.
Because Iron Galaxy has done a number of Switch ports as well, and those have been pretty stable. But yeah, I mean, I remember the Arkham City PC port, the debacle around WB Games, and kind of pulling it from the store for a while as well.
Right. So, I mean, here we have a similar situation to the Rockstar port of the GTA trilogy, right? And the problem is that, obviously the company itself is responsible for for the IP, and in this case, Sony, PlayStation, Naughty Dog is responsible for the Last of Us IP. And as the article does mention and is accurate, they're coming off a really big media push with the Last of Us TV show on HBO. And so actually the thing that's fortunate about this is this came out after the show ended. So it won't muddy the reputation from that consideration. Right now the Metacritic score on the game is a 56. I haven't actually paid attention to that. I've been watching the Steam scores because that's a community that I trust. And regardless of what a Metacritic score is, my own personal rubric is, I look for a Metacritic score of 80 or above, but then when it's a PC game, then I go check the Steam community, and the Steam community says even if the game's 80 above, they're still not liking it, then that's an indicator that, at least for me, I shouldn't bother. On Metacritic, the game launched and was set at mixed reviews when I checked it, and then over the couple of days went down to mostly negative. Since the two patches have been released, in particular the one on 30 March, where there has been some performance improvement, it is now back up to mixed. It was at 43% when I checked it earlier today. So, that's still not safe to go into the waters, but at least, shows an upward trend. So Iron Galaxies did do Batman Arkham Knight in 2015.
Yep, I was just fact checking that as well. So yes, it was not City, but it was Knight, and Knight was the one that was a problem.
Yep. So, the important thing is, and the good thing is that Naughty Dog has responded, saying that they're taking, responsibility. It sounds like it's kind of the same, response and return to green that Rockstar pulled, which is that, hey, we're not going to tell the outsource developer to do it. We're going to go in and do it ourselves. So they're directly involved and engaged. The key thing about this is, of course, we're going to talk about, Christopher Judge's statements, on social media. Anti-PlayStation fans are pulling this out as like an ace card and a thumb in the eye and, a reason that, PlayStation bad. And, one of the things I posted on Twitter today, I was like, the only people that should be concerned about The Last of Us on PC and how it's performing are actual PC gamers. A lot of people are involved in throwing mud at PlayStation who don't have gaming PCs, and so were never part of the addressable market and had never had any intention of buying this game. And so, the mention of their negative comments is not something that I'm particularly interested in, and I don't think does, a lot of good for anyone else. For tried and true Steam users, you'll do the thing that you normally do. You'll keep an eye on this, see the patches that are applied, see if this thing eventually becomes better and creeps back up to that, mostly positive thing. And games do this on Steam all the time. They, Steam tracks two figures. They track the overall Steam community review, and then they track the recent Steam community review. And that's to tell you, hey, I see this lots of times when I go and look at the game. There are games that launch well or that have historically been good, but make a major swerve when they release a patch, right? Change a lot of the functionality, particularly for long-lived games. And then the game nosedives, right? Or the game was historically bad, but then miraculously there's a major rework patch that comes out that kind of turns the game around. So, people who are interested in playing this on PC, and I have heard people say that, they've gone in and bought the game and waited for the shaders to compile and and have an enjoyable experience. I will say what it seems like is even when you are patient and wait, that the game is extremely CPU and GPU intensive, and like overly uses a lot of resources that are not necessary. And so, if you do other things with your PC, like I do, like recording, while you're playing a game sometimes, then it's still, like I said, not safe to go in the waters.
So since you mentioned the Christopher Judge comment, let's jump to that in terms of God of War voice actor Christopher Judge made some statements this week calling out kind of console wars. So why don't you had that story as well, Game Logic.
Yeah, that story over on GameSpot by Eddie Makich. God of War's Christopher Judge calls for end to console war, give each other a break. Article starts off, God of War actor Christopher Judge, who plays Kratos, has called for the gaming community to be nice to one another no matter what platform they play on, appearing at the BAFTA Game Award on Thursday night, where he won the award for performer in a leading role for Kratos in God of War Ragnarok. Judge used his speech to call for gaming fans to come together. So, I'm not going to go over the whole history of like why, console war's bad. I think we've covered that enough on this show. I think the thing that's particularly bothersome is, and just this week we had the voice actress who plays Ada Wong in the Resident Evil 4 remake, which I have a physical copy of waiting at GameStop, which I haven't picked up yet, but I'll be jumping on that game as well here in the next couple of weeks. Was basically driven off of Instagram, right, because of the harassment that she was receiving for her performance in the game. And Sony Santa Monica experienced this as well. They had a lot of people, talking a bunch of stuff at the developers because of, Sony being inspecific about what the date was that it was going to come out and things like that. And Sony Santa Monica had to intervene, make a statement. And I've spoken to a lot of developers and told them, hey, I'm in software engineering also. I don't really know why you guys are on social media like trying to talk to people, because they don't listen. They're not actually interested in learning about software development. They're just interested in telling you, what they think about the job that you're doing, whether or not they have any background or understanding at all. I'm like, so don't bother, don't expose yourself. But the thing that's bothersome is, and people, when I bring things up like this, people like to say they're whataboutisms. And I'm like, we have real world problems, right? We have, unknown spy balloons showing up in American airspace. We have a war raging in the Ukraine that threatens the stability of the entire European continent based on how people respond. We have a debt ceiling here that needs to be raised, trillions of dollars of debt, a budget that hasn't been signed since last year. I go on and on and on and on. Public shootings, school shootings, things of that. And you can, pick and choose and decide, well, those things don't matter. But the point is that a voice actor in a video game who could have used their time, right, to address some of those more critical problems, had to use their time to address something as stupid as console wars. Console wars that rage between people who supposedly, and I often call this into question and will continue to do so, enjoy video games, right? The problem with the console war is that it's a lot of people who don't actually love video games. Because as I mentioned earlier today on another podcast, if you actually love video games, you wouldn't be trying to tear down creators who have worked hard at their craft to put content out just because they put it out on a different platform. If you really love video games, you wouldn't try and tear down Uncharted. You wouldn't try and tear down God of War Ragnarok. You wouldn't try and tear down now I forget the name of the game, but crap. What is the Xbox exclusive that came out last year, or the timed exclusive, or the day and date game that came out? Requiem.
Plague Tale Requiem?
Yes, Plague Tale, right. So many people engage on doing things like tearing down a game just because it comes day and date to Game Pass, right? The game will be on both platforms and available for everyone to play, right? And people will be negative on the game simply because it's day and date on Game Pass. As I say all the time, and I'm saying a lot more emphatically now, those aren't people who actually love video games. Those are people who have Stockholm syndrome and are engaged in social media clout chasing and, are commenting on video games because they're worried about being seen and not because they actually love playing video games. If you loved video games, like I said, you wouldn't tear things down just because they aren't on your preferred platform. So, the world continues, and, we continue to have one of the things I say about, Sony Santa Monica and voice actors and video game developers themselves, and I say this sometimes too about like actors and actresses who are in like superhero movies, right? Who get flame sprayed by fans, or comic book creators who, Dan Slott, right? Who experienced a ton of abuse, right? For what he did with the Spider-Man storyline. And I'm just like, in this age where the nerds have inherited the earth, I don't know why any real content creator, right? Not a YouTuber, right? From a person who actually professionally makes their living from creating, professionally made content. I don't know why any of them do it, right? Because it seems like it's often a thankless job, right? Based on how they get treated by fans. So just we on the show we cover the cultural impact, the social impact of video games, and so it's just sad and unfortunate that continues to be one.
Well said. Thank you. I think it's also notable here because Christopher Judge gave a really heartfelt speech during the Game Awards back in December and got a lot of good coverage and press over kind of the emotional statements and kind of the positive aspect that he brought to that. And to then use a similar platform, rather than, as you said, right, rather than making this about an uplifting message, it is, hey, cut it out, right? It is let's treat each other civilized. Let's be respectful. So yeah. Thank you, Game Logic. We've got a few more news stories here before we wrap things up. Kyle, this one is not a surprise because all we've ever seen is a computer-generated Vin Diesel. But Arc 2 is delayed? Arc 2 is still a video game?
Evidently, yes, it is. And the publisher, or the developer, I'm sorry, Wildcard recently said they're delaying Arc 2 until the end of 2024 now. It's supposed to come out, supposedly sometime this year. They never really gave a specific date or anything, but they've come out and officially said it's coming out at the end of next year, which we'll see, because once again, they didn't give any kind of specific date. And a couple of the reasons they gave were because they're moving over to Unreal 5, so they need more time. And then also, sorry, I was trying to find where they were talking about it. I can't find what the other reason is. I'll look at it for a second. But the other thing there's a couple things that came out of here in this article from Rock Paper Shotgun was, one, they kind of gave a description of what the game was, which I didn't realize it was this, but it's it has the Souls-like combat, primitive weapons only. So if you've ever played the original Ark, you can actually get like kind of modern weapons, so like pistols and machine guns and stuff like that. And then you can even upgrade even further to like tech weapons, which are laser guns and backpacks that you can fly around, and spaceships and stuff, or all kind of spaceships or floating vehicles that you can get onto. But here you can only do primitive weapons and strict third-person mechanics, which in the first Ark you could switch between first and third person, excuse me. And then there's an overly very serious tone to the second one, evidently. So, which, I mean, I don't know if I guess the first one seemed kind of serious. I mean, I never saw any kind of like jokey stuff or anything, like any kind of weird, funny stuff or anything like that. But there was kind of a loose storyline, I guess, in the first one. You kind of had a little bit search for it, but I think they kind of weaved it in a little bit more later on with all the updates they've done to that game. But then the second thing that they announced is that they're gonna, once the Arc 2 actually does come out, they announced a bundle basically that you can buy. It's called the Arc Respawn Bundle. And you'll get Arc Survival Ascended, which is going to be basically a remaster of the first game using the Unreal Engine 5. That's what I was thinking of. So they're going to use that remaster kind of help them out too with some of the game mechanics they're trying to do on Arc 2. So that's going to give them more experience, I guess, according to the article. And then you'll get actually Arc 2 along with that, even though most people still don't know what that is. Oh, and all that for $50. All right, sounds cool. But when Arc Survival Ascended comes out, and I don't think they gave date for that one on here. Oh, by the end of August 2023. Supposedly that's supposed to come out. Arc Ascended, Survival Ascended, excuse me. When that comes out, the original Arc servers are going to be shut down. That seems a little bit wonky to me. That's just me, maybe. That they're going to force you to buy and this new Survival Ascended. And from this article, they said you have to buy the bundle to get the remaster, basically. Which once again, you're going to get Survival Ascended, which is nice, and then an Arc 2, which you don't really kind of know what it is yet, if it even will ever come out. Like you don't really know. So those are the kind of the two things that kind of came out of the article, which I thought, man, that seems a little bit, like I said, it seems a little wonky to me. I don't know what you guys think of this announcement.
So this is Arc is currently a free a full price game, right? Or there is a paid product here.
Right. Yeah, you do have to pay for
the
initial game.
It's not surprising that they would move over servers, right? Because moving on to they're running in a different engine. I think the timing of it feels abrupt, right? Like I could see another 6 months of sunsetting, or something that gives a transition period. I think I would be curious to know what the art community thinks. I could guess, based on our previous conversation about Christopher Judge, what people might be saying about it. But I can, for those that are committed players, this probably makes a whole lot of sense. For the casual player, it probably throws up a red flag in terms of how invested do you want to be to keep moving on. I'll be curious to see if this timeline holds or if they backtrack like so many other companies have done when they announce the shutting down of some servers.
Yeah, and they did mention that the single player, you'll still be able to do the single player and unofficial servers on the original Arc. So, I mean, I guess you can still do that, I suppose. And I'm assuming you can probably do just like what I've done with my son, just kind of local multiplayer, which you're kind of tethered together when you're doing that single player or when you're doing the local multiplayer like that, where there's like a certain distance you can only go away from each other, which is why we kind of like to go to the official servers. So because then you're just open. It doesn't matter because you're obviously not playing on a single platform or a single console or whatever. So, but I mean that's what they got to do. So.
All right. Moving from shutting down servers to our final news story. This came officially from the ESA, but it was kind of announced the night before. Rebecca Valentine over on IGN had multiple confirmations from inside sources that E3 was officially going to be canceled. And yes, it is officially canceled. I don't know that anybody is really surprised. We kind of saw the writing on the wall as other companies were backing out, and even companies that had committed, like Ubisoft, and then was backing out over the last couple of weeks. I guess it is the E3 is dead, long live Summer of Games, right? Like the purpose that E3 served still kind of exists, but just maybe not through the same platforms that E3 once served. I think there's the potential for all kinds of industry discussions here in terms of how gaming news and experiences are disseminated, the difference between how the role that E3 played in terms of retailers and ordering, which is different than it once was, and the visibility or the capacity of smaller developers to get out in front of an audience when they can push out a game demo during a Steam Neck Fest or something like that. So, I think that there are lots of ways that much of E3 can be, the same roles can be hit. But whether that same experience is possible or not, or even should be, I guess is a whole nother question. But gentlemen, any initial thoughts here on E3 being canceled? I would think that maybe as we come into June and the number of directs and showcases and other gaming press conferences and events that we'll have a chance to kind of weave in some thoughts about what we miss, what the industry misses by not having an event, or if there really is, if it has been usurped in such a way that it is no longer necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of said the last couple of years since E3 has been, or a few years now that E3 has been gone, I kind of miss it just because of just for selfishly for our podcast and just how we gather the news. Because obviously, you get most of the majority of the news at E3. There's stuff obviously throughout the year, but majority of or at least the big stuff would come out. Then now it's just kind of scattershot throughout the summer and even kind of throughout the year nowadays. Really, I mean, we still, we get the directs. Nintendo directs. Obviously, that's been for a while. But now we have the Sony, and I'm assuming Microsoft will start doing something similar at some point. I guess they kind of did it, I guess, with a developer direct this year. But the previous years they're still kind of just waiting around, E3 time frame before they kind of dropped everything. But it seems even they're starting to do the same thing. So just for, like I said, just for ourselves or for myself, it was kind of just easier being able to gather it all in one place or one time, within that week. But we live in a new age now, so we get pretty much surprise news all the time. It seems like nowadays. So we'll just see how it goes.
Game Logic, any thoughts? I mean, I would guess you have a few. Any that you want to share at this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing kind of Cal said. I mean, so the first thing, it's a workflow problem, right? It's like now we're on high alert like the entire summer instead of, we used to do I was telling some people on another podcast, like we used to gear up a war room that essentially was the same, right, as like the big websites, right, to kind of crash the boards and do this whole thing, and kept exhaustive lists of like everything that was seen during the week. But it was a week, right? We were exhausted, and you slept a long time, right? You took some naps, on the Saturday and Sunday after it was all done. Told your family, you were going to be down in your computer room, exhaustively watching, press events. And I think the most unfortunate thing is now we have a lot more frequent shows that we care less about, right? I mean, I appreciate it, like they're, they're doing the Nintendo, but like we have like three Nintendo Directs that we don't care about, right? We care about one in every four, right? And I'm kind of like, I understand that the industry's gone to that and they all want their time to shine. But there was some upside from, a Big Bang Theory show that kind of set the stage and the tone for the year. And then quite honestly, they were able to pack up and leave and go away and not bother us anymore, And so there was some upside to that. So, but I also feel like that particular show had obviously lost its relevance, right? So, it's time for a new thing to come in, I guess.
Yeah, we will see what this, if this June, the Summer of Games, if the IGN, if the, Devolver Digital and Steam Next Fest, and even last week we had a Games Radar showcase, right? Like, how many others jump into this, and if that mix of who's announcing what changes now that there's nothing official. But again, for the last couple of years, we've kind of been drifting into this direction as E3 has kind of come in and out in different ways since post-pandemic. All right, let's move into our final segment, gentlemen. I yesterday had a chance to go to the Midwest Gaming Classic. Midwest Gaming Classic has been around for, I think, almost 18 years now or so. It takes place in the Milwaukee area. It is both a vendor show, there is a big hall of tons of pinball, classic arcade games, and basically every console system and created. I had a chance to see things that I've only seen in magazines, like the Super Graphics, the Super PC Engine. How about a Fairchild F, a Mark III from Sega? Get a chance. All of these had things up and running. It was fun. I had a chance to go with my kids. They had my very first PC. IBM PC Junior there with the classic joystick that we had as well. Lots of options and some good panels, but really it was it's designed to be just kind of a playtime. Lots of very kind of PAX-esque in terms of rooms and spaces to play with people, different competitions, but a lot of just free play stuff going on. So it was fun to kind of get a chance to play around with a variety of classic games, and which is, after traveling for the last week and playing a lot on my analog pocket, I've definitely been enjoying the trip down retro memory lane. So we've got some other games that are maybe not the newest that tie into our retro aspect here. Game Logic, you have been playing the remaster version of Persona 3 Portable, which originally Persona 3 Portable was a PSP game, which was a port of the PlayStation 2 game. So again, tripping back down a few decades here, but I remember playing it on PSP. I'm curious to see your impressions, because I don't know that I would peg you as somebody who is in the Persona kind of, this is in your wheelhouse, or did it come up in the spinner of games to try?
Came up in the spinner of games to try. You are hit the nail right on the head. This is not in my wheelhouse, and it is in my. It's half in and half out, which is going to be a very interesting thing, right? It's in my wheelhouse as a turn-based tactical RPG. It is not in my wheelhouse in that it is dressed in the trappings of a JRPG. Maybe you'd argue that it's maybe 2/3 in my wheelhouse, because it, part of the rest that goes on with it is relationship building, right? And things that you do interacting with characters and how you tie characters together in the interchanges between battles. And so, it has that Fire Emblem, kind of thing to it. It's very interesting from a fiction perspective, as I've gone through and seen and been exposed to, some of the whole plot setup. Very, very super reminiscent of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, with all the kids gathering in the library on the 4th floor, with the Giles equivalent, teacher who has no superpowers himself, but is still the kind of the head of the team. So that's been enjoyable. We're going to see how the tactical combat unfolds, because it kind of ramps from there not being a ton of kind of tools to alter the tactical outcome of the fight. But as you get exposed to more characters, and as I've gotten like a second persona now, so you get presented more and more tactical options, and we're going to see how that kind of plays out. You then get exposed to kind of this little kind of real-time element that's kind of a mini game in between, and sometimes kind of preceding some of the tactical turn-based set pieces. So, it's going to be interesting to see. What's been enjoyable is just being exposed to this corner of the content in terms of the Persona series, by Atlas, published by Sega, which is just a blind spot for me. And so, that exposure has been enjoyable. Like you mentioned, it is a remastered, so, some Persona fans might consider it slander to not call it a new game. But it is a next-gen remaster, and is actually tagged and labeled as a Xbox Series XS application right in the store. I am playing this game via Game Pass on the Xbox Series X, so it was enjoyable when it came up in the spinner. That's value for my subscription, and a thing that I didn't necessarily have to go out and pay for as an individual title. So it's been super interesting getting into it.
Nice. I'll be curious. Yeah, I enjoyed my time with it back, decade and a half ago at this point. But having Persona 3, 4, Golden, and 5 Royale on Game Pass is a great value add, because all three of those, there's a lot of content in those games. Yep. Speaking of a lot of content in a game that spans generations, Tao, you have been playing yet again, and not in a bad way, right? But in the regular rotation is a little bit of Minecraft. So earlier in the podcast, you talked about playing some games. You played Ark with playing Roblox with your son. Are you playing Minecraft with family or by yourself?
Yes, so back with my son. Every like few months, he'll want to jump back into Minecraft. And surprisingly, though, this time usually we'll just start a new world, and start building stuff. But we actually jumped into an older world the last time we played a few months back, or early in the year. We just started that world again, kind of continued on with it, which he had a kind of like a base down or like a house already, and was kind of building out like a farm and stuff. He started to, so now he kind of finished that off, and like it's amazing, like he can just watch a video on somebody like building a structure and just pretty much recreate that thing like right away. And I'm like struggling just to build like a simple little hut or something. It's just like I find it amazing that kids, and not just him, obviously there's a lot of kids out there that can do that. And it's just crazy to me. But yeah, we started doing that, and there's been a lot of updates actually, or a good amount of updates since the last time we played. So we kind of want to. We have to. So when they do updates, they still update your current world. So just wherever you haven't gone yet, they'll that portion of the world gets updated. So we kind of we'll have to travel out to see some of the new mobs and some of the new different like minerals and stuff like that they've added. So it's kind of nice when they do that. So I try not to go like too far out usually when we're playing like that, just so we don't have to travel out too far out to get that new content. So continuing jumping on that and just other games that we've been playing lately, like I said, Roblox and stuff like that. So one question for you though on your Midwest Gaming Classic, did you see a Vectrex there? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember if I did.
Okay. I was just wondering because I was like I remember one of my earliest memories of having that console. It was kind of an all-in-one built-in console. It had the little joystick, if people don't know what that is.
Yeah, no, I think
a little TV screen,
they had a
CRT.
number of those types there, but I don't remember if it was a specific Vectrex or not. Yep.
Okay. I just wonder.
No, and it was. I should correct myself, right? It is not every console or PC, because I did not see a VIC-20, and I saw a Commodore 64 up and running with games. There were there were so many different variations of Pong machines that were created, and not all of them were represented there, but it was kind of a sampling.
Yeah.
So yes, I do believe I did see a Vectrex, but I think that truthfully, some of those kind of blended together after. But yeah, they were some of those little boxes. Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
All right. Sticking on the older games and remasters and generation spanning, Game Logic, take us home with your last one here with a little bit of racing.
Yeah, you're just full of slander tonight with saying these games aren't new. Some people will take much offense. But yeah, gentlemen, Need for Speed remastered, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit remastered, from somebody who has played most iterations of the series since Need for Speed 2 High Stakes. Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, the 2010 version, and there was Hot Pursuit 2, and then this Need for Speed, right, kind of reboot, right, by Criterion in 2010. Just in my opinion, maybe the pinnacle of the series. And this was kind of, in a time period where, it's arguable that Need for Speed had kind of lost its way as a franchise, and they were kind of trying to figure out how to get that mojo back. They had kind of had some, the highlight of their time, peak of their time, maybe before that was maybe the 2005, as I mentioned frequently before, 2005 Most Wanted by EA Canada and Black Box, I think. The real Most Wanted with the black Mustang on the cover, not the Criterion. I mean, as much as I heap praise on top of Criterion for this, I think I've mentioned before, I don't think they've ever done anything before. Most Wanted was a low point, in my opinion. It was actually kind of nice that they got brought back to do Unbound, because I am happier with Unbound than I was with Most Wanted. Not nearly as happy as I am with Hot Pursuit, but this was just, like I said, kind of the pinnacle of the series. It is on Game Pass now via EA Play, which is how I'm playing it. So again, just normally probably would have been a game that I would have, bought. But, at least for the time being, it's nice that I can just access it. That means that it is also available on PC Game Pass, which is where I'm playing it. I have the good fortune to then play it on one of my systems with one of the new widescreen monitors. So I'm playing it at 3440 by 1440p. Great Scott, man. It's just an absolutely tremendous experience. The unfortunate thing is the game is, because it's a remaster and they didn't stretch the technology that far. The game caps at 60 frames per second, which is unfortunate. But just going from Swiss and I played this game a lot. We played multiplayer a lot. Swiss and another friend of ours used to get up early on Saturday morning when we all first had kids, and that was the only time that we could game. Right. But I just remember looking at the plasma TV, 10 feet away from me, and just squinting, struggling to make things out as they were whizzing by me. Struggled to kind of have clarity on the map and what events I was going into. It is just so much more crisp and so much more clear now playing at near 4K in resolution. And like I said, just playing it in that widescreen format. I'm playing it on an RTX 3070 Ti system, and it's just a wonderful experience. And it's really, I think we've had comments on here, and as much as there's good work in remasters, I always kind of set them below the bar of new games. Right. And I always say, remasters are great nostalgia play, but nobody really cares. But this is a really good example of when a game is polished up and you got to spit on it and, wipe off all the dust, that it just provides a really amazing modern experience still. When you kind of, put some oil, on the brakes and kind of take it out of the garage. And so, it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm really pleased to be able to play it. It's really nice that it's available right on EA Play and via Game Pass.
Yeah, I played it a little bit last year, 2 years ago on Game Pass. Probably last year because came out in the fall of 2020. But you're right. I mean, just because I'm calling these games not new does not make them not good, right? There is a lot of quality gameplay out there that can be found, whether it's in a remaster, whether it's in something that's buried in your backlog, or that you just get a chance to discover through a subscription service or a Steam sale that has been kind of off your radar. And so there's so many potential of games out there that can be really enjoyable experiences, even if it is not the hottest, hypest, headline grabbing game of the week. So yes, if I have offended people, then that's okay.
I of course say that jokingly.
Well, I will say, right? If that offends you, go back through your backlog and what are you missing? Take a moment to see what, take Game Logic's approach of the spinner and see what you have put some money into, but you haven't put some time into, and get some return on that investment. So, gentlemen, anything else as we wrap up tonight?
The only thing I'll add is I did notice, because I just caught it out of the corner of my eye, that while I was scrolling through Game Pass, and I hadn't realized this, that Super Mega Baseball, since EA acquired that studio, is now also available via EA Play and Game Pass, which I didn't realize was going to happen. And so if you haven't had a chance to check that out, you should definitely do so if you're a Game Pass subscriber.
And that's Super Mega Baseball 3. Super Mega Baseball 2 came out on Game Pass, launched on Game Pass. But Super Mega Baseball 3 came out to Game Pass, I think, sometime last year before the end of the season. But yeah, it's a beautiful, it's a fun game. A little cartoony. I've played it on Xbox, owned it on Switch. It runs great, regardless of where it's at. And it is a really deep and solid baseball game. So yeah, there are good baseball game options out there for you, even if you're, if you're not looking to plunk down $70 for MLB The Show, or you want something that maybe is a little less realistic, but also has a lot of depth to it. Super Mega Baseball is a solid franchise. Well, nice pull. Anything else? Tao, any final thoughts?
No, and just kind of, you mentioned the spinner thing that Game Logic does from with his games. That's what I tend to do at the beginning of the year with Game Pass, where I just I'm kind of not tired, but I kind of get worn out a little bit on all the big games that come out at the end of that year, and I'm kind of just looking for stuff, some that most of the time I try to look for some maybe I haven't played before, or just maybe a genre that I usually don't play. So that's what I think probably mainly use Game Pass for the most part.
Nice. Well, gentlemen, I know that we will have more to talk about next week and the week after, and many more weeks after that as we continue to play not only some new stuff, but as we make our way back through things that we have enjoyed, things that we have forgotten about, or discover along the way. So, for myself, DBQ Hams, Game Logic, and Tilemaster 99, this has been episode 284 of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. Next week, we will be back again. Tilemaster is at the helm for episode 285. So, for all of us here, to those of you listening, watching, whether you've joined us along the way or you're listening to us after the fact, thank you. Come on back. We're glad to have you here. But until next time, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everyone.